Hello, everybody. I'm glad you all joined us today. Uh, just a few announcements before we begin. Uh, we are going to continue our architects and professors interviews, and we will be posting them up on YouTube. And as soon as we get those links, we'll be posting them on Facebook and on Instagram. The other announcements I have is our next lecturer will be Andrzej Steinmuller from California College of the Arts, and our last and that'll be in March, and our last one will be Stephen Hall in April. Today we are being joined by a really fantastic guy, and I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Tim Castillo, who is an associate professor of architecture at the University of New Mexico and co-founder of Finding Rural. He is a gracious host, so I hope I can be just as gracious as he is. I mean, I've met him several times, and one of the ones that I've always appreciated him and the faculty at UNM is one summer my students drove up to the university, and they spent the faculty that was there, including Tim, spent a whole Saturday with them giving them a critique. And again, this was in the summer when everybody's out on vacation. So I truly appreciate Tim Castillo, and I'll just go ahead and pass it on to him.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel. It's a pleasure to be able to be with y'all today. I have some great connection to El Paso. My family is originally from El Paso. I grew up in Silver City, so not too far. I guess about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, sort of northwest of y'all. But it's incredible, being able to use Zoom in a way where you get to be virtually in many places. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I just really wanted to just maybe jump into the talk. Is that all right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Well, I kind of broke this topic up. Let me see if I need to share screen. I think I'd be good at this now. Let's see. Are you seeing my?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, I broke this topic up into 3 different areas, and really, like I said, it really resonates from a kind of evolution in my career, and I entitled it "Design is Ubiquitous." And for you that might not know what ubiquitous is, here's the definition. I'm sure that everybody does, but appearing or found everywhere. And I think that to me really was something that has stuck with me in terms of my my training and my interest in design. I had a colleague, actually a mentor of mine, many years ago, said, everything is designed. So anything that you look at, any object, anything that you think about, somebody's put some thought to it and really taken the effort to think about what that does, in a capacity. And so I think for me, design really began, probably around middle school, and really understanding what that meant. And it's oddly enough, I've got this shoe, and I think that what I think is really interesting about it is that I was sort of fascinated with the idea of footwear. I played a lot of sports when I was younger. Actually, my father was a coach, so it was sort of in the family. Right around, say, the early '80s, Dr. J and Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird all had their own shoe lines. Isaiah Thomas, for you guys that are old enough to remember that. But I think it wasn't really till Nike really started to really think about the power of a brand and the power of design. And so Peter Moore was the sort of head director of the Air Jordan brand. And ultimately, Tinker Hatfield really took it over. And if anybody has looked at the abstract design talks on Netflix, you'll know that Tinker was actually trained as an architect at the University of Oregon. And for me, it was really just this fascination with, the kind of thought and the aesthetic of shoes. The other thing that sort of was really fascinating to me was infrastructure. I remember going down to El Paso and just seeing these, beautiful, bridges, floating above me. And it's just really interesting to me about, the kind of homage to the automobile, but also this kind of poetry of invading the landscape and really mitigating, that time and that space. And I think for me, that was always something that I was drawn to. This is actually the Big I here in Albuquerque, and it's been around for about 20 years. And it just, they took it to the next level in terms of really thinking about, the kind of matching the landscape in terms of its color scheme and really, that blending of the infrastructure itself. The other thing that I thought was really interesting to me, and this came a little bit later, was the acequia culture. And I don't know if anybody's really aware what that means, but when the Spaniards came and settled in Mexico and all the way up into northern New Mexico, they brought a technology that was meant to help them, sustain themselves in communities. And so they were always looking for waterways and being able to develop these acequia plans. And so it's really a system that was diverting the water that would actually irrigate the fields. And it's a very complex system. There's a whole democracy around the way that that's sort of maintained. But on the right, you see a map, and that's a map from 1910. And all of those are these linear kind of plots of land. And so everybody sees these diversions of water, and they have puertas that are, doors of water that actually hold the water back, and then they flood basically the plain. And that's how, over, since the early 1700s, these sort of communities started to evolve, and they have a deep cultural and influence in New Mexico. So that was really something that was very, influential in thinking about design. The other one is really much more of a contemporary thing, the whole idea of the iPhone, and computing and technology. And, Jonathan Ive, from Apple was very, very, interested in aesthetic. And when you look back at, Apple's evolution and you really think about, that brand, there's an aesthetic thing that's tied to it. And it has been a driving aesthetic for since Apple sort of came to bear. And I'm very, interested in the kind of, tying a brand. One of the things that I'm very interested in is branding. And so for me, this sort of kind of paradigm shift of the technology is also something that has translated into a larger spectrum and really something that I carry in my work as well. And of course, the last thing is really architecture. I love architecture. I teach architecture, and I really teach it from a contemporary kind of standpoint. And really, I brought a couple of images of people that I really admire. Of course, Tom Main from Morphosis is really a huge influence. And the other one is Diller and Scofidio. And Diller and Scofidio is really, I've watched them since they didn't even have built work. They were really doing installations back in the late 80s and early 90s. But they've really grown into this sort of prominent architect. And so, my icons in terms of architecture are people like Peter Zumthor and Louis Kahn, and of course, Antoine Prudhomme had a big, sort of influence in the way I think about architectural design. The other thing that I think was really important, and this sort of was later in my career, was the Ames. And so, if you're not familiar with Ames, I'm sure you've seen the Barco Lounger. Every architectural interior shot has the Barco Lounger in there, right? And so the Ames were a unique firm in that Charles was trained as an architect. I don't actually think he finished his architectural schooling, but definitely was trained. And then Ray studied art, and so they blended the kind of worlds of design. So they did architecture, they did graphic design, they did photography, furniture, and film. And to me, that was really something that I really thought was important to where I wanted to go with my work. I love architecture, but I really wanted to expand into to a greater kind of conversation about what an architect and architectural design can do. Again, this is Ames's house in California, which in some ways is kind of a warehouse, but in terms of the interior and the function of it, I think is really interesting. But I think the thing that I took away from Ames was really the influential, thought of film and what that means and graphic design. And so if you've ever seen the little film, you can see it on YouTube, The Powers of 10. It's really remarkable because there wasn't computer graphics when they did this. And it's just all analog. And it's just really kind of, mind-blowing in terms of what they were able to do. And that to me actually really allowed me to think in a broader context about maybe some of my interests and some of the things that I wanted to do with my work. I actually did my undergraduate here at the University of New Mexico, studied with a great man, Kramer Woodard, and he was my mentor. And actually, he had gone to Columbia University, and he suggested that I do the same. And so, like I said, I grew up in Silver City. It's a mining town, and so it's fairly secluded. My heart is always going to be part of this community. I really, I have extended family. My parents both grew up there, and it's just really a really beautiful place to be. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you haven't, I would suggest you go and just kind of, get away from the heat sometimes in the summer. It's about 10 degrees cooler in Silver City than in El Paso. But again, moving to Columbia, this was right around the early 90s when I went to study in New York. And I studied with a man, Bernard Toomey, who was the dean. He was actually my professor the very last year I was at Columbia. And it just had such a profound effect on what he was talking about. And, he was writing about the Manhattan transcripts and, and just the kind of a discourse that was happening from a theoretical level really kind of changed my thinking about the way I thought about the built environment, but also in terms of things that were, impacting me socially. And so one of the things that he did, which was totally phenomenal for that day, was he said, we're going to move Columbia into the future. And so he got this $1 million grant to bring in the first computers to Columbia. And people were using computers. When I left New Mexico, I had learned to model in 3D on a Mac, but we were using these high-end computers, and it was silicone graphics workstations, and they were really intended for the special effects industry. And nobody in the country, nobody in the world at that time had that technology. And he just bought these computers with nobody that really knew how to do it. And there weren't very many manuals. We were using a software called Softimage. And it was really these two guys that really led that charge. They don't get enough credit, for what people call the digital evolution of computing and architecture. But Peter Overdorfer and John Baker had actually worked in the animation business prior to coming to Columbia. They were actually educated at Berkeley for undergrad. And they were just very genuine people, and they just wanted to promote this digital kind of wave, and really had a huge impact in the way I started to think about architecture. They led the wave. There was this, these, architects like Greg Lynn and Hani Rashid, and even Stephen Hole, who you'll have lecturing, benefited from the work that these guys did. And to this day, they're doing phenomenal things. They've actually left the special effects industry. They formed this company called Giant Killer Robots, and they did everything from Batman to they worked on The Matrix. They worked on a film called What Dreams May Come, which is a Robin Williams film that actually won an Oscar. They won an Oscar, and they got saturated by the kind of industry, so they've migrated to other things. But they really planted a seed in my work. And so what you see here is this is a design that I worked on in graduate school. It was a new library for Lincoln Center, and actually was dedicated to theme music and theater. And so what you see on the right is an animation that I did on silicon graphics computers, and it's very rudimentary, it's very dated, but it really liberated my thought process and gave me really a different kind of framework to think about, like, what is media doing? How are we going to work in this new realm? And what does that mean to education, and what does it mean to the future of architecture? And so, I really started to think about this notion of innovation. And I've worked at 4 different institutions over my career. I started my career in New Jersey, and then was at University of Arizona for a little while, University of Colorado, and then I came to UNM. And I've been here for about 19 years. And about, I'd say 10 years ago, I actually got the opportunity to become the director of the Digital Media Lab at the University of New Mexico. And it was called the Arts Lab, but it stood for Art, Research, Technology, and Science. And the intention of this lab was to be interdisciplinary. And so we had people from fine arts, people from engineering, people from computer science, education. They would all come to us because they wanted to do explore the digital realm and really think about how they could frame their work in a different kind of framework and be able to execute it in a different way. So when I became director, I was like, well, we don't want to be MIT, and we don't want to be a lab in Palo Alto, or we don't want to be UCLA. We want to really ground this in New Mexico. And so these are a couple of photos by a good friend and former professor at UNM, Miguel Gandrit. He's world renowned. And what you see are these images of some of the cultural festivals and rituals that go on in northern New Mexico. And it's really grounded in this sort of this people and this place. And that was really what I really thought would be special in terms of reframing the lab and being able to reposition our work to really address the assets that we have in the state and in the region. We were very successful in getting big grants, and we were able to collaborate with people like the American Indian Art Institute up in Santa Fe. And we also were able to collaborate with the National Hispanic Cultural Center. We had these great tools. So you'll see in the top right is an immersive dome. So there's only a couple of domes like this that are at universities in the country, and we were one of them. And so we became very well known at a global level for doing this kind of immersive research. And so kind of the predecessor to virtual reality. But what was great about it is it actually was a communal scene. So if you've ever been to a planetarium, this is kind of the kind of format we were working in, but we were creating different content that had never been done before. And so, when we started to really understand where we were headed, we really started to carve a pathway for the things that we knew we could do really well. And those were things like immersive media, cultural media, where geospatial kind of content, education, and information communication. And we had these tools like green screens and motion captures and domes that really allowed us to do things very different than what potentially other people were doing across the country. And so I'm going to talk about the first project that really was very different in the way that I started to think about innovation. And what I really wanted to do was give back to the communities, these historic communities, and really create a database that start to look at the historical evolution. We were really interested in the Acequia culture in Embudo, Dixon Embudo, and really trying to archive it because it's changing over time, and we wanted to kind of preserve it in a way. So we thought we got to create a repository that allows us to be able to pull this together in an open source kind of format. And so you can see that some of the three-dimensional modeling that we were able to do. This is just a really like a template, introduction animation. But we were looking at different kinds of platforms, and really one of the things that we arrived at in looking at the complexity of stuff that was in these communities was we wanted to look at the culture, the economy, the history, the geography, the infrastructure, and create those layers and really break them down. And so we kind of moved into a platform that was sort of, again, omnipresent and very available to everybody. And it was Google Earth, and being able to layer this geospatial data into a place that could start to tell the story of these places in New Mexico. And so it really migrated from Embudo to the Virtual New Mexico project. That's what we ended up calling it. And we looked at places like the mining community in Silver City, Santa Rosa, and the ranching. We looked at Las Vegas and looked at the rail yard and how all these different economic engines have a very different sort of idea, and really how that resonates in the community, and really how the people work around that. And so again, we really created some really interesting kind of sort of research in terms of looking at visualization to tell the story about what the community was about, but also we did these YouTube interviews with different residents, and really historical residents, people that were from that community for many generations. And this is a video by one of our students, Sam Cisneros, who actually went to UTEP, and so this was a graduate course that I taught, and he had an uncle in Santa Rosa, and he talked about living off the land, and talked about how they would basically preserve the water for irrigation, and really capture it in a way, because rain is very precious, and being able to maintain it and sustain it was really part of how they lived. And so we created this whole YouTube channel with these interviews, and we basically cross-referenced it with the geospatial kind of content, and then put these animations in that really talk about the kind of infrastructural and built environment kind of components that comprise that. And so it was really like a 6 to 7 year effort in terms of pulling this together. And then right now this is actually I was telling Emmanuel, I'm on sabbatical right now this spring, and one of the things that I'm working on is a virtual reality platform. And I'm really looking at this as potentially as the future in terms of education, and really using these platforms to create these immersive tools that allow people to see these amazing places we have in our state. So this is actually one of the churches in Silver City, and then down below is the Opera House in Pinos Altos, and it's really really tying metadata and being able to talk about the history and layering these videos with these people from this community, and really telling a story in a different way. If you ever looked at the New York Times 360 model, there's some really beautiful things that they've done, and it's really something that I'm trying to blend into my work. And so really, I'm always interested in new tools and what that means to designs. So this is just one of those projects that really sort of has evolved over time. The other one is a project that I worked on with Levi Romero and Miguel Gandrit that was really intended to take Levi Romero's work as a poet. He's a poet, but an architect. He was actually trained as an architect, but now is a professor in Chicano studies here at UNM. But at the time, we wrote this grant, and we got money from the National Endowment for the Arts to generate a series of panels, and to use Miguel Gandrit's photographs to tell a story about his poems, and go to the plazas around the state and really create this experience. We kind of likened it to the drive-in theater, and we were really kind of looking for a way to project this on multiple panels. And so we used a digital projection system to be able to tell this story, and it was phenomenal. We really got a lot of people to come out to the plazas and be able to hear these poems being recited, and really seeing the kind of visual. So I'm going to play a video so you can kind of get a sense of this and get the flavor of the area.
Cruise, Taos Plaza. This morning I decided to throw one more cruise through the plaza, en memoria de Primo Bill y de los resolaneros de aquellos tiempos. Those men who had found their circle come together in the presence of each other. Like everything else around here, it seems all is become memory. Some Saturday mornings, my father would make the 20-mile trip into town. We'd park at the Cantu Furniture parking lot that sits atop the old 7-Eleven building off Paseo del Pueblo Sur. It was exciting for me then, as a small boy, to know that our car was moving across the roof of the store below. And now I still find it amusing. How did that sort of engineering feat arrive in Taos? The other evening, I pulled into that same parking lot and for a brief moment contemplated leaving my truck there, but for the sign that read, "Customer parking only, all others towed away." This morning, as I cruised into the plaza, I saw one lone recognizable living remnant figure, standing in faded jeans, white t-shirt, Converse canvas all-stars, and a bundle of newspapers strapped around his shoulder. It was El Polly, flat top, square jawed, and looking 30 years ago still the same. But where were you, Primo B? The park benches deserted, the covered portales no longer bursting, with children clinging to their mother's sharpened stride. Mama strolling elegant, black hair curled, red lips.
I didn't get it all through you, but that was just one of the poems that we were able to do, and so we did about 6 of them, and we were, just excited to get this out. It actually has been exhibited at a couple of galleries around the state, and so it's just really a phenomenal project, and really, something that really was a team effort. And I think that was one of the things that I really was really passionate about, was really working with a team to be able to expand, what I knew, and being able to be challenged by colleagues to be able to do something different and outside of the box. So speaking of that, another thing that we were very interested in doing was utilizing this projection mapping technology. It's very kind of hip right now. A lot of people are using it on buildings and other installations across the globe. But we were approached by the University of New Mexico's communication and marketing team, and they wanted to do basically some kind of promotion board for the university at the airport. And they came to us at the Arts Lab and said, we want to work with the fabrication department at architecture to do something really spectacular and something very different. And so we started brainstorming, and I said, we got to use this projection mapping technology to do something completely out of the box. And so we started really with, sketches about, what this thing could be, and really started with a kind of formal intrigue and really what that meant to the visitors as they arrived. We wanted something sculptural that really was unlike anything that you would see in an airport. And so we started prototyping this, at full scale, and really looking at, how human interaction would start to work with these forms. And one of the things that we were very interested in was being able to map gestural movements, and so using human interaction computing to be able to tie it into the visual. But we also wanted to tell a story, and that story was about what was happening at UNM, the research, the school life, the students, the athletics, and we broke it down into these different kind of areas. And then we started to generate some different animations that really started to give us an idea about how we could overlay this content and use that tessellated pattern to our advantage. What you see on the left is sort of that visual narrative that we were interested in telling the story about what was happening at UNM. And on the right is really this sort of interactive component where people could come up and interact with those balls. Unfortunately, that piece sort of got scrapped later on in the project, but it was actually working. It was really an interesting thing. So what was really great about it is that it actually got implemented, and it was there at the airport for about 3 years. And so if you ever flew into the Sunport, it was the very first thing that greeted you as you exited the secure zone. And this thing was constantly moving, and it was really, and they would reprogram it with new visuals, periodically through those 3 years. And it actually won a couple of national awards for image branding And so yeah, it was really a fantastic experience and a great collaborative. We had a ribbon cutting with the mayor of Albuquerque, the president of the university, and so there was a lot to do with we're promoting the creative work that we were doing. I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk a little bit about the Finding Rural program. Like I said, grew up in Silver City, so there's a huge passion to the kind of rural landscape and the people that live in these sort of regions around the state of New Mexico. Finding Rural sort of came about from a conversation with the president of Western New Mexico University. He came to the School of Architecture, and it was actually for something completely different than what we ended up talking about. And my dean at the time, Geraldine Forbes, she actually started to talk to the president and said, hey, what if we could do something down in Silver City and really think about it in terms of benefiting the community? And instead of doing it for 1 year or one semester, let's talk about a 3-year commitment. And he was a great guy, Joseph Shepard, and so that's what we ended up doing. And we ended up going down to Silver City in 2015, and we founded, a program called Plata Studio. And we brought students from Woodbury University and University of New Mexico. So my co-founder was Stan Berthoud, who was a professor in architecture, but also a professor in film. He actually is a screenwriter and has actually left architecture now, and he's actually writing a screenplay right now. But we also kind of thought about bringing other people to the table to be able to diversify our thought process and really give us some different kind of perspectives of how we can engage the community. So we brought people in like John Qualley, who's the chair up here at UNM, and then Mary Harden, who at that time was interim dean at University of Arizona, and Michael Metcalf, who's the chair of the Expressive Arts program down in Western New Mexico. And so we really started with talking to people. We really, these students were coming from all, different walks of life, from California and from all over New Mexico. And many of them had never been to Silver City. So the first thing we did is we talked to the leadership. So right there in the middle is Howie Morales, and he used to be a state senator. He's actually the lieutenant governor of New Mexico now. To the left is Joseph Shepard, the president, and then to the right is Priscilla Lucera, who is the director of the Council of Governments. To the far left, in the dark blue shirt, is Alex Brown, the city manager. And then to the right, a gentleman that is the representative of the New Mexico Arts Council in Silver City. And we really just went around and started talking to people. What is important about Silver City? What do you find amazing about this place? And what does it need? And we weren't sure what the program was going to be, but really this first year was really about just getting out there. So I'm going to show you a video of how we use film as a way of educating the community, our efforts, and what we wanted to do. I'll let this play for a second.
My name is John Flores.
I'm Jennifer Phillip.
Hey, I'm Brian Benz.
My name is John Shannon. My name is James Bajak.
My name is Julius Flores.
My name is Estefania Gijena.
My name is Tony Salamoni.
Chris Steinle.
Yate, Geraldine Blackcoat. I think Plata Studio really is an opportunity for us to engage with real problems and real people. Usually in school we're dealing with a lot of theoreticals, and with Plata Studio we really have an opportunity to make a positive impact on this community and make something real.
Plata Studio is a collaborative effort between Woodbury University and the University of New Mexico. Here in Silver City, New Mexico, we're using Western University as our base camp for kind of exploring ideas and the potentials.
Plata Studio is really just a way for students to immerse themselves in something different and begin to help the community and learn about the different kind of people that are around.
For the students, in this case for me, to come here and interchange ideas with the community and actually get to know them, in order to propose, in order to give something back to them.
So it gives you a little bit of an idea about, how we engage the community and the kind of diversity that happens there. There's a rodeo that goes on. There's this huge culinary scene. Food is very important to the community, and just really the kind of, the poetic nature of the landscape, being in the Gila wilderness and that kind of threshold into that community. And so, we came up and we just started, charretting and really having the students develop ideas, and we came up with things like a culinary institute, a mining museum, a nature observatory, and every student had their own project, and we presented to the community, and they were just blown away by the kind of effort that we put forward, and then the leadership of of Silver City really started to resonate with what we were doing. It's like, well, this is an amazing opportunity to be able to get these students with a different look on our community, and how can we start to maybe really start to develop some of these ideas. And so the second year we went down there, we really started to become a little bit more refined in the way we were thinking about our idea, and really thinking about narrowing it down to something that actually could have some greater resonance in promoting economic development and really repositioning the community in a different way. And so we started talking about the makers movement, and really thinking about a program that started to span from the kids to the elderly, and creating a STEM or a STEAM education platform. And so Western at the time had this promotional trailer that they called BU. So go to Western and BU, and you can find your education there. We took that tagline and spun it into Create You, and we wanted to create a space where kids could come, where you could have forums, you could have public discussions about creation and making. One of the great things about Silver City is they have this great clay festival every year, and they have the people from all over the globe that come there to just come to learn about clay making, but also to promote their wares. And so we decided that second year we came in with a smaller group of people, of students, and we started to think about, well, how do we make this happen? We don't have a building, and the building might be difficult to start to get a hold of, and there's a lot of bureaucratic logistics in terms of getting that going. So I said, well, what if we took a truck, say like a food truck, and we started to promote that in a way where it could be deployed into different areas, to schools, into libraries, and it would unfold, and you would have laser cutters and 3D printers and CNC routers, and ways of making that that would really create a different kind of mechanism for inspiring the youth, and inspiring the youth to do something different with what they're doing in Silver City. And so that we ended that, and we presented this to the community, and they really got excited. And people were like, well, how do we start to make a Makers Lab here? And we ended up writing a grant, and we created a lecture series. We got people like Ron Rial to come down, and we got somebody from MIT Media Lab to come down and really talk about the idea of making and how it can resonate in a community like Silver City. That led us to the third year, and we came in with a bigger bunch of students, mostly from Woodbury University that year. And we really said, we want to create something that really leaves a legacy for what we've done here, and we want to make something. Stan and I were like, we got to leave something that really the people can use. And so we play another video. This one's actually cut short, and just talk about like where our mindset was.
Rural. The hard work, no excuse, humble, get it done, dedicated, roll up your sleeves attitude. Rural. Over here we have doers, makers, artists, dreamers who, like the rushing flow of the big ditch after a storm, carves their own pathway in life. Rural. At Plata Studio, we know music, cuisine, technology, and design influences rural communities just as much as the rural community influences them. The future of Silver City relies on both. Rural is sustainable. Rural is resourceful. The love for creating, for playing, for making and doing doesn't stop at rural. To our doers and to our dreamers, it starts and lives on with you.
So we kind of, promoted this to the students and said, hey, we're going to make something and we're going to take it back to Silver City and we're going to have an impact. And so they started off, with shredding these ideas and started making. And we came up with we got a little grant from UNM and we got the opportunity to buy a 3D printer and some VR goggles. And we said, this is going to be our little technological kiosk. We're going to give that to the city. We're going to make a stop motion, kiosk for kids using mobile devices, and we're going to leave that there. We made a music kiosk, allowed the kids to start to, basically take this apart and be able to create different kind of rhythms and notes. And then we made an origami kiosk, and it was really intended to get people to think about the tactility and how to use form and shape to make different objects. And we came up with a little trailer, and we said, if we were able to take this in a trailer, we could move it across to the different schools and the kids could be able to use these. And so we went to the city manager and said, hey, we've created these kiosks. We'd love to be able to, get a trailer. And he said, you know what? I have the money. I'm going to buy you a trailer. And so we were able to buy the trailer, and then we went and talked to the people at the school district, the Silver City School District, and they had a gentleman, Ben Potts, who was the IT director. He said, I got some 3D printers as well. I'll maintain and run this. And so it was like a win-win-win. And so he's still running this program and being able to deploy this little trailer with these little kiosks to the different schools in that region. And so it was a really phenomenal experience. These 3 years were really impactful. One of the more exciting things that I've done while at UNM. And then I gave this exact lecture to the New Mexico state senators. It was actually the Technological and Innovation Committee. And when I gave it, there was a gentleman who was very interested in the idea of the Makers Lab, the mobile Makers Lab. And so his name is Carlos Romero. He's up in the top right. And he's the vice president for research and economic development at New Mexico Tech. And then he said, my clients are the Air Force Research Lab, and they have money to design a mobile lab, and they want to take it out into the rural parts of New Mexico. And would you be interested in this? And so I said, yeah, I need to get somebody that's phenomenal on my team that does fabrication, digital fabrication. I'm pretty good at it, but I'm not as great as somebody like my colleague, Steve Mora, there in the middle. Steve's a visiting professor here at UNM and just teaches amazing classes in digital fabrication. So he and I started to talk, and we brought this collaborative. We partnered with CNM, the Central New Mexico Community College, with Fuse Makerspace, with Innovate Albuquerque, and the Lobo Rainforest. And we got this donated trailer. It was actually a desalinization unit that New Mexico Tech had. And they said, well, can you turn this into something cool? And so we had to get it, take it all out and take out that desalinization unit. And then we started to really think about, well, what can we do with it? So we started to sketch and model and really think about, like, what does this want to be? And one of the things that we were drawn to was the sort of aerodynamic nature of the Air Force, the wings, the kind of tactility and the surface of that. And that really drove the kind of the language of the studies. And so we started to do these three-dimensional kind of explorations and really just start to think about, what could we do? And really think about the promotion of the material as a moving billboard. And we really started to think about this kind of perforated skin, moving through the landscape as a promotional piece for the trailer. And really that light should be very evident in this place. It's a making unit. And so light should be very obvious and really influence the spatial composition. And then really the illumination from the backside, it becomes this illuminated platform. And so then we started to create these shape files and being able to use the router as a toolkit. We actually never did any traditional plans and sections. We actually worked completely in 3 dimensions in Rhino and modeled it, at different scales until we were able to start to fabricate it at full scale. Our team was a diversity team. We had this phenomenal group of individuals that, they lived in this little trailer to be able to build it. And so you can kind of start to see, the kind of various elements that were associated to it. We were very interested again in the kind of public presentation, the idea of making and being able to, for it to be a billboard. It really expressed pride in the Air Force owning it, but also in terms of its, application and sort of visibility in New Mexico. And so this is kind of the perforated metal skin that we used. We used an aluminum skin to be able to manufacture it. We milled that all ourselves. And then we also started to think about the reverse side. And so we wanted to be almost like an X-ray, being able to see into the trailer and be able to see that sort of kind of language that was developed in the kind of aerodynamic plane. And so you can actually see the vinyl wrap that we use to be able to promote what was happening on the other side. And then, we were able to start to program it internally and really start to think about the different elements and use LED lights to be able to promote what was happening on the inside. And so here you can see, sort of fisheye lens of the inside and the kind of big cowl wall that we were able to get in there and how it was used. And so all of these tools are actually on their kiosks, and so they can be rolled into schools or they can actually be parked and people can come in, kids can come in and be able to utilize it, in groups of about 10 to 15. And so we were able to take it out on the road and we debuted it at the Air Force Air Show. And we had probably about 2,000 people that came through that trailer. And we also did it at the state fairgrounds. Of course, this was pre-COVID. And then the next year was COVID. So it's kind of been on hiatus a little bit, but here's our kind of image that really talks about how we'd like to get it out into the various parts of New Mexico and really start to think about, how does this become maybe the impetus for something that becomes a fleet? Could we make more of these and actually have it in the 4 corners of our state and be able to get people interested in STEM and STEAM technology and really inspire the youth to think outside the box about what they can do and who they can become. I'm kind of running late on time, so I'm gonna speed this up. But I want you to just kind of see the evolution of how it was produced. So that kind of gives you an idea. And it created quite a buzz at the university. And, you know, a couple of my colleagues really approached me about this big grant that they wanted to pursue. And it was a National Science Foundation grant that really looked at clay technology. And so we received this grant actually this January. It's actually a $1 million grant that will allow us to work with artists that work in clay in a traditional framework, and then introduce new technology. So what you'll see on the bottom right is actually a 3D clay printer. And the idea is to really fuse this together with the artist, and then spin it back out to the community, teach the community's process with the hope that economic development will come. So my colleague, Manuel Montoya, who's actually a professor in the business school, is really looking at how that starts to translate. And so that's really a pilot project that we're very excited about. Is over the next 3 years, we'll be working on developing this and working with artists across the state. So again, you know, sort of building on this sort of evolution from the rural studio or from the Finding Rural program, it's really kind of growing into something that's quite different. I'm gonna close here with a few more projects. This is actually a collaborative. My recent role at the university has changed. I'm still a professor in architecture, but I actually report to the provost now. And UNM is trying to look at developing a new visibility in Santa Fe. Santa Fe has this campus that they own that used to be the Santa Fe Art and Design campus. Unfortunately, those tenants left, and the city is looking for a new opportunity. This campus is actually, if you've ever been to Santa Fe, it's on the corner of St. Mike's and Cerrillos, and it's a 54-acre sort of plot of land. It originally had dorms, and you know, there's different kinds of facilities, of course, a library and other things. But the city of Santa Fe was very interested in looking at new ways of promoting the future and really thinking about it as a new economic engine for the future. So they wanted to bring things like film and technology, higher education, and bring housing to this campus to reinvigorate the community in a different way. So we were at the university very vested in the higher education component. And so I brought a group of faculty from different disciplines, and we came up with what we call the Aquifer Center for Art, Design, Culture, and Innovation, and really as a way of promoting design in a different way, maybe drawing its roots from the Arts Lab, but really kind of expanding the platform into something that you know, has a greater impact and maybe more of a global impact. We started to think about, you know, this notion of creativity and what's driving the future. Well, things like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, big data, robotics. Those are all things that we were very vested in seeing happen. But we also wanted to use the industry collaborations that we have here in the state. We have 2 national laboratories at our disposal, being able to partner up with them, being able to use the museums and the cultural organizations, and being able to think about how new media plays a role in their world. And then there's a bunch of great new startups in the region, and really creating partnerships, you know, creating exposure for our students that come from a design background and giving them the impetus to work in these collaborative environments. Again, we were very interested in working as a hub and thinking about how our institution can partner up with all the different institutions in our state. New Mexico Tech, New Mexico State, Santa Fe Community College is a huge partner, and really thinking about an incubator that really starts to be something different, and maybe looking at the model of education in a different format. We're really looking at executive programs and certificates. I think that education is changing, and we really need to be fluid in how we think about it. So the Aquifer is really a new place for that. This is actually a couple of renderings from my studio in the fall. That was our project. We did 3 different projects in the fall, and one of them was looking at, you know, what can the Aquifer Center be? And so this is actually a student named Corey Joy that did this, and you know, just really thinking out of the box. You know, we want to be able to promote you know, different ways of making. And I brought images from the School of Architecture, but also from the robotics lab, from the laser lab at UNM, the information and digital media, and being able to think about, how does this new place start to become, an impactful environment for the future of Santa Fe, but really for the state of New Mexico. So again, the future is very, very bright, I think. I think rural communities have great opportunity. The state of New Mexico has great opportunity. And you guys, in terms of our collaboration and our proximity. And so I think, as I think about it, these are just some of the work that we continue to do in the Rural Studio, working in places like Deming, Las Lunas, Dixon, Santa Clara, and really expanding that into a larger framework, and really trying to think about, I think if you think of a place like New York, everything is sort of centralized in New York City. But if we think about New Mexico in the same way, maybe we're not centralized, but we do have these networks, and being able to allow those networks to influence each other, I think is a great thing. And so again, design is ubiquitous, but I think as students and architects, you should think about designing everything. Think about opening the doors to what your imagination can hold, and really think about, people like Charles and Ray Ames, they did everything. And I think for me, that's how I approach the world. That's really how I think about, the work that I do. It's not necessarily in a silo, but it's really in the notion of collaboration. So again, I want to thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be here. And I'm looking forward to getting back down to El Paso and seeing you guys someday.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Do you have time for questions and answers?
Of course.
Fantastic. Let's I'll open up the forum for questions. It says here, I've got this today there are new technologies that are helping the environment a lot. My question is, what is the vision in architecture regarding the design of the net zero building? The innovation of these buildings could combine the equilibrium between innovation and cultural identity?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, I think there's a lot of work being done in net zero. I think there's a lot of firms across the U.S. that are really invested in that. And really, for me, I think about it from a different perspective. I think about it from a perspective of what does a smart building start to look like? And with iPhones and mobile technology, there's a way to start to understand the capacity of energy in a building that we've never ever been able to perceive, right? You can actually, in real time start to understand the metric by which your building operates in. And really, I think that, even like rain capture, what can we do with that? And how does one start to program that in a different way? And so I think, our state is really moving, a huge platform from the governor is really moving to renewable energy. And I think that is going to have a huge impact in the built environment and what we start to see. I think LEED certification is always a good metric to achieve. But I think for me, the notion of cultural identity is an interesting one, because I think that what does that start to equate? I think when I think about that in terms of architecture, you start to think about what is indigenous to the environment, and how does one start to specify these new technologies in let's just take a place like Santa Fe that has this sort of Adobe aesthetic. Does that become integrated? If you have say solar panels on top, does it create a different environment? I don't know. I mean, it's something that I think that we're going to have to prototype and understand as we get better at these technologies. I think, even in California, there's these solar captures that are, integrated into the red tile, which I think is really interesting. So really thinking about the form factor and how that plays a role in sort of preservation of a kind of visual identity. So anyway, I think it has to be both ends. I think it has to be at a kind of macro level, looking at the built environment at a kind of a larger framework, but also, you know, the kind of, you know, sort of systems thinking about how one starts to think about the technology and what that means to controlling and mitigating some of the measures that they imply, you know, a sustainable kind of future.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? People are shy even on the internet here.
A little shy today.
I'll throw one there, Professor. Hey Tim, how's it going? This is one of the architecture faculties here at EPCC. It's so cool. Such a cool presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us today. I was seeing your presentation. I was like, oh, cool. It's like MIT's Media Lab, you know, in New Mexico. But as soon as you started walking us through your work, and it became evidently that it's not, you know, and you actually even mentioned that, you know, you brought that up, and I think it's very, you know, unique to our region. So, you know, that just made me feel very, very excited about it, even more so, you know, I mean, the technology is amazing, but, you know, seeing it grounded in our culture is fascinating. And, you know, I have a question, you know, I mean, our students, you know, I mean, especially this generation, you know, our students are so technology savvy and so avid and so, you know, I mean, they're just ready to go. I was wondering if you would have any suggestions for them, maybe anything that you would advise for them to get their hands on if they wanna maybe start playing with any of these tools. I don't know, maybe something device or gadget they can maybe purchase on Amazon, or an app that they can maybe download on their phone, or anything that could maybe, you know, start kind of, okay, so I'm a community college right now, but we're not really doing this at school right now, but if any of them wanted to start kind of playing with anything like this, I don't know, is any of this technology available for home use or?
Exactly. There's so much out there, you know. I think, you know, I think it depends on, like, you know, what the interest of the student is. Like, if they're makers, you know, you can get a 3D printer for like $150 now. And really, you know, you can start to use different softwares, you know, Tinkercad, you know, if you guys are .edu, so you get the whole Autodesk platform. So you could, you could use any of those modeling tools and start to work in a 3D kind of workflow. I think the quicker people can start to understand how to model and make in digital technology, the better. I think you know, they do, like I've always had my students where you know, some know and some don't, and the ones that know actually kind of sail really quickly to their ideas. The other one, and you know, I think looking at, you know, these, you know, the mobile platform, I think is a really interesting one. One that I'm really interested in right now is the augmented reality platform, and really looking at, you know, how can we start to augment things. You know, I think where it might have some practicality is in like construction industry. You know, you are going to be able to, instead of having construction documents, you're going to be able to use an iPad or a phone to walk you through the methodology of how one would assemble. But if you look at like an online platform like Spark AR, it's a free platform that that is actually integrated into Facebook and into Instagram. And so students can download that for free, and you can start to create your own augmented reality kind of stuff. So those are a couple of things that I think, you know, are easy to start to move into. And again, you know, geospatial, I think, is a big one. As an architect, you need to be able to understand how to navigate, you know, in the geospatial world. Google Earth, there's so much stuff you can do with Google Earth. Just play with it. Look at what you can do. Start to model in it. Start to bring in information. You know, as you are students, you start to look at the kind of greater application of in a built environment, and Google Earth's a great platform to work on.
Thank you. Victoria has a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, so I'm a graduate student. I hopped in on this. My question is that I'm like I'm now leaving the architecture core, but under the old stuff, and we're being introduced new technologies. Is this a new medium platform? These new technologies, like you at like of the future, are these is this a new platform for architects and emerging professionals from now on in the design field? Because I'm familiar with the MIT lab and SciArc. They have these technologies, but will these technologies be of the future? Because my question is, we're learning all of these softwares, but we don't know what we're going to be acquired when we get out of graduate school.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think the way I always think about it is, you know, like being software agnostic, meaning that you should learn software, but don't like, you know, gravitate to one. So a lot of people will go to Revit or they'll go to Rhino, but really what I try to get my students to do is think about how you use the technology to execute your ideas. And so, yes, to your question, yeah, all this stuff is going to be the future. It already is, right? And so, you know, the interesting thing is that I see a lot of my students getting opportunities that know how to code. And so if you know how to code in a different way, if you know how to use like Python or Java, those are some tools that that give you an advantage in the workplace, you know. And people are using, you probably haven't looked at Grasshopper yet. You know, if you use Rhino, you can use a plugin called Grasshopper. And some of the things that Grasshopper can do is automate different things. And it's really a powerful, powerful tool. And there's so many like YouTube videos about how to use the technology. But the more you know, and the more you can embrace your own thought processes through the technology, I think the more marketable you are in the job world. So continue to think about how you use it for your own growth. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
Yes,
because
we're required to answer social equity. So these platforms you guys are using answers to all these problems going up in the other than cultural identities, but you guys also use them. They can also be used in other platforms for social equity and urban development problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, you know, the social equity one is really interesting. I think, Emmanuel, the project you were talking about, one of the things, we just did a study for a memorial, veterans memorial in Santa Clara, New Mexico. And one of the things that, you know, most of the time when you go to a memorial, like if you've ever been to the Vietnam Memorial in DC, you know, it's this granite and the names are etched in there. But what we were pitching to them is actually using augmented reality as the tool to get people there. And so being able to use your phone to be able to go up to a monument and get a story about what that's about, it just changes the framework, right? You could talk about, you know, World War II, you could talk about, you know, the Bataan March. It doesn't matter. And it changes the experience. So, you know, as a designer, you're thinking, you know, not just the kind of physicality, but you're also thinking about the experience. And so, you know, these things are changing and they're changing quickly. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question here by Karen, says, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give us as new architecture students?
I would say be open to everything. Think about, you know, I think as architecture students, sometimes we get myopic, you know, we kind of go, wow, look at that architecture building. But then, you know, I think that was one of the things I always was amazed at in New York, is that there's just so many people doing cool stuff, not just the architects. You know, there's the people that are product designers, the people that are working in industry and industrial design. So look at tangential things and really think about what does that mean, and how do these people working in these different disciplines, what can I take and extract from that and maybe blend it into the way I work. I find that people that come from different backgrounds in architecture are the ones that actually have some of the more creative ideas. So look at your place that you came from. Look at the people, even people that make, I'm a huge, I'm a foodie. And so I love the culinary arts, and I'm always watching these, Netflix series on food. And I'm just amazed by, the kind of precision and, the kind of abstractness of of how these, Michelin star chefs pull this stuff together, and it actually influences the way I think about design as well. So, my advice is don't just look at architecture through the lens of, the built environment. Look at it in the framework that expands the way that you think about the world, and I think you'll appreciate it in a different way.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has one.
Well, Prof, maybe while the students think of a question, I have maybe just if maybe Tim could, I don't know, maybe take our students, their first and second year architecture students. Could you maybe share with them what maybe their curriculum could look like? I mean, what kind of opportunities would I don't know, the school provide over there in Albuquerque, the architecture? How does all of this fit within undergraduate or graduate programs for the coming architecture generation?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because I think that we at UNM realized that we're the only architecture school in the state, but a lot of our students, our graduates, were getting jobs doing other things. Some went into the film industry. The film industry is huge in New Mexico. Some went into computer animation. Others went into like visualization, and digital fabrication. There's a whole bunch of guys that are, and architecture students are working in digital fabrication. But so we realized that, so our curriculum has actually shifted. We have the pre-professional, which is actually, if they were to come to UNM, they would do the 2 years at UNM and then move into the master's program, which is another 2 years. So that one's a pretty succinct timeline, very traditional. But then we also created another thing called design concentrations. And so a student can come in and actually start to carve their own interests. So we could give them, an experience in digital media if they wanted to get an emphasis in that, or product design or interior design. And so we really have expanded our offerings to be able to really gauge the new student, because I think that what we found is that our students are really interested in a lot of things. And I think the internet has actually changed the way that our students are coming to us now. They're actually far more educated, far more exposed than they were 15 years ago. And so we want to be able to cater to those students. And so I think if you're a student that wants to explore different offerings, UNM has that opportunity.
So our students can absolutely, this could be a route that they could take and join UNM.
Exactly, definitely. Please come to UNM.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
One question did pop up. It's Karen again asked, what kind of a job would you recommend to get as a student and get involved to know and to be known in the architecture area?
Let's see, what kind of job would you recommend to get as a student? I think, like I always think it's important for a student to get exposure to the fabrication technologies. So like a lot of what I try to get my students to do is go work at the Fab Lab, learn how to use the CNC router, learn how to use the router, go in and learn how to use the laser jet, and it's really, it'll force you to think about how to make in that kind of framework. And, some of the guys that helped us with the making of the mobile lab, they were, they're far beyond my expertise, but, they came in and they started to learn this, and they, the other thing is, again, coming back to the coding, I think, if a student were interested in learning how to code, we have offerings, in being able to work in the computer lab and being able to work with some of the people that are there to get that exposure. And so anyway, I think it's really important to do that. And then the other last thing I think is being able to get like a student work study with a professor. I'm always hiring students that have a skill set. I'm always looking for somebody that has great design skills, and being able to work with a team that I usually work with, it just helps you in terms of broadening your horizons and giving you opportunity to think in a different way and be exposed to different methodologies. We're all designers, we're all architects, but we work in different ways. And I think that in itself is just a great opportunity to have.
Right. And one final question that popped up here. It says, speaking of 3D printers, do you also work with large-scale 3D printers for clay for structures?
You know, that's actually something that we haven't. I know one of the things that we're trying to do right now is push towards robotics and really and really look at large-scale 3D printing. Right now, the one thing that's kind of challenging for us right now is we're kind of limited by space in our building, and so a robotic arm requires a pretty large bay to be able to do that, and then again 3D printing. So I think with the clay grant, we might start to look at some of purchasing some of that. You know, Ron Rael is a really great friend of mine, and I know he's doing all these great things in Antonito with the Adobe pouring, and so I want to pick his brain, and I think actually Santa Fe might be where we might have the opportunity to sort of platform something like that, and be able to really kind of to meld that kind of new technology with a kind of material that is indigenous to the climate and to the region. So anyway, I think we're not there yet, but the future is right on the cusp of us really being able to pursue something like that.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate your presentation. It was wonderful. And yes, a big round of applause for you. Of course, it's very different nowadays, right? Yeah. And,
thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you. And with that, I guess I will finish